I never thought I'd be that guy, the one telling his story of betrayal on some stupid subreddit, but here I am. I was supposed to marry Sarah. We had the perfect plans, the white dress, the vows, the future. Everything seemed solid until I found out the truth. It hit me like a punch in the gut while I was standing at the altar reciting my vows. People were watching, some with smiles, most with polite applause, but my world was shattering behind that facade. It was during the ceremony that I first noticed her. Sarah, glowing, tears in her eyes, whispering her vows so radiant. I felt my stomach tighten, a weird twisting, but I kept going. I was all in. Then as I looked out into the crowd, I saw Mike, my best man, staring at her with this weird, intense look. Not just admiration or pride. It was something darker, like he was hiding a secret behind that fake smile. I dismissed it at first, telling myself I was paranoid. Maybe he was just happy for us. Later that evening, after the reception, I was exhausted but happy. We went back to the hotel, eager to kick off the honeymoon phase. I remember how the air smelled like fresh linens and the faint aroma of champagne. I was about to fall asleep when I noticed my phone buzzing repeatedly on the nightstand. I ignored it at first, then curiosity got the better of me. Of course, it was from Sarah, but there were also messages from Mike. I hesitated, then unlocked the screen. The messages weren't innocent. They weren't just "congrats, can't wait to see you tomorrow" or some sweet nonsense. No, they were explicit, flirty, and downright disgusting, talking about sneaking off, getting some privacy, and can't keep my hands off her. My stomach sank. My palms got sweaty. That sick, sinking feeling crept up my back like icy fingers. I didn't want to believe it. I stared at the screen, trying to find a way to dismiss it as a joke or some misinterpretation. But it was all right there in black and white. I knew right then and there that everything I believed in had been a lie. My wife, the love of my life, was cheating on me with my best friend during our wedding weekend. I remember sitting up, feeling cold. Despite the warm hotel room, my mind whirled trying to process what I'd just seen. How long had this been going on? Did she plan it all? Did I mean nothing to her? I wanted to scream but couldn't find my voice. Instead, I just clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my palms, feeling the sharp sting. That's when I decided I needed to see for myself. No more assumptions, no more denial. I would find the proof. I had to know how deep this betrayal went. The next morning, I told myself I'd be calm, collected. I needed to see the evidence. I called the front desk and asked about their room service charges. Nothing suspicious there. Then I looked at their recent calls and messages. Nothing immediately obvious, but I knew how these things worked. The real proof was in the details. The hotel room key, the secret meetings, the sneaking around. I started to do some digging. That's when I remembered Mike had a habit of leaving his phone on the nightstand during the wedding. I'd seen him do it a dozen times. I decided I'd somehow get a hold of it, even if I had to sneak in. I waited until he was in the shower, then slipped into his room. My heart was pounding so loud I thought I'd wake the hotel walls. I found his phone on the bedside table, unlocked it with a quick fingerprint scan I'd managed earlier. What I saw made everything clear. There were photos, a few of Sarah and Mike, clearly taken in the hotel room. The messages, the timestamps, they all aligned perfectly with the wedding weekend. They'd been sneaking around the entire time. My stomach twisted again, but this time with fury. I clenched the phone so hard my fingers trembled. My mind raced with plans to expose him, to confront her. But I knew I'd need a foolproof plan. That's where I'm at now. I have the evidence, I know how deep they've gone. And I'm starting to plot my revenge. I'll make sure they both regret what they did. I still feel the ache in my chest, but I also feel something sharper, a cold resolve. They took everything from me, but now I'm taking back something more. Something they can't run from. What they did was unforgivable, and I'm not about to let this slide. I'll make sure they see the damage they caused. I just need to figure out how. I've spent the last couple of days staring at those photos on Mike's phone, trying to come up with a plan that hits harder than just a straightforward accusation. I want them to feel the weight of it, to see how thoroughly they destroyed everything we had. I've always believed in some kind of justice, but this feels different. This feels personal. I started thinking about what revenge really looks like. I could go straight to Sarah, confront her, cause a scene. But that might be too easy for her. She's probably used to her lies and manipulations. Mike, too. I want to hit them where it hurts, make them understand how much I know, how utterly betrayed I feel. I want to make sure they never forget what they did. So I stepped back and started planning. First, I needed to get into their heads. I needed to understand what they were after, what their weaknesses were. Sarah is a social butterfly, always craving attention, always trying to feel special. Mike, on the other hand, is more insecure than he'd like to admit. He's always been jealous of my confidence, my life. They look perfect on the surface, but behind closed doors I see cracks. I decided I'd lure Sarah into a trap, something subtle but effective. I started by planting little things around her social media, subtle hints that I knew. I commented on her photos, just enough for her to notice I was watching. Nothing obvious, just enough to make her uncomfortable. I wanted her to see I was paying attention. It was petty, I know, but this is how I'm fighting fire with fire. I also reached out to a few of her friends, people I knew she trusted, to spread rumors. Nothing malicious, just enough to stir her up, make her paranoid. Mike, I decided, would be a different story. I needed him to feel exposed, vulnerable. I contacted some hotel staff, asked about the details of their stay, and I even booked a room nearby under a fake name. I wanted to be close enough to observe, to catch them in the act again if possible. I also bought a cheap voice recorder, just in case I could catch a confession or something to confirm my suspicions. All of this was about control. I realized I didn't want to just confront them blindly. I wanted to have the upper hand, to know exactly what I was walking into. I wanted to make sure they knew I'd figured everything out, no more secrets, no more hiding. I had to be smart about this. I had to make them feel cornered. The day I planned to execute my plan was tense. I felt my stomach knot up every time I thought about it. I could almost feel the adrenaline surging through my veins. My hands were slick with sweat as I made the last arrangements. Everything was set. I knew where they'd be, I knew what I'd say, and I knew what I wanted to accomplish. This wasn't just a moment of anger, it was about justice, even if it was revenge. That evening I sat in my room, watching the hotel lobby through a small camera I'd installed. I saw Sarah walking in, laughing with some friends, her face glowing like she was on top of the world. Mike was right behind her, looking too relaxed. I felt a strange mixture of rage and a sick satisfaction. It was finally happening. They did. No, I was watching. I waited until they went into their room, then I slipped inside mine, silent as a shadow. I took a deep breath, feeling the sharp sting of nerves in my chest. My mind kept circling around one question: how far am I willing to go? I knew I couldn't undo what they'd done, but I could make sure they never forget that I found out, that I knew everything. I reached into my bag and took out my phone, carefully turning on the voice recorder. Then I sent one last message to Sarah, just a simple, direct line. I know everything, don't think you're getting away with it. The moment I pressed send, I felt the cold satisfaction creep in. Whatever comes next, I'm ready for it. Because now, they're the ones on the defensive. And I've got all the proof I need to make sure they regret crossing me. This is only the beginning. The next morning, I woke up with a strange clarity. The night had been a blur of nerves and adrenaline, but I knew I'd done what I needed. I had evidence, a plan in place, and a sense of control I hadn't felt in days. Still, part of me was anxious. What if they somehow found out I was watching? What if I underestimated how far they'd go to cover their tracks? I stayed in my room and watched the hotel's security feed for a while, pretending to relax, but I was on high alert. When I saw Sarah and Mike leave the room, I moved fast to follow. I had arranged for a taxi to be waiting a few blocks away so I could stay discreet. I kept my distance, feeling the rush of nervous energy in my stomach. Every step I took was deliberate. I wanted to see their reactions, see how they behaved once they realized I was onto them. They went into a cafe across town, sitting in the back where they thought no one could eavesdrop. I watched from a nearby alley, feeling like some kind of spy in a bad movie. Sarah was laughing, leaning in close, her hand resting on Mike's knee. It was such a stark contrast to the image she'd shown everyone at the wedding. She looked carefree, happy even, but I knew better now. That happiness was fake. It was a mask. I pulled out my phone and started recording from a discreet distance. If I was going to do this right, I needed undeniable proof that they were still planning something. I also snapped a few photos of their faces, just in case. Once I was satisfied I had enough evidence, I slipped away quietly, not wanting to blow my cover. Back at my hotel, I poured myself a glass of water and replayed the recordings. Hearing them talk like that, acting like they weren't doing anything wrong, made my stomach churn. Sarah kept calling Mike her secret weapon, and he kept whispering things like, "We've got to keep this quiet for a little longer." That's when it hit me, this wasn't just a one-time thing. They'd been planning this, hiding it from everyone, maybe even from me. I knew I had to act fast now. I'd gathered all the pieces I needed, but I wasn't going to confront them in the heat of the moment. No, I wanted to make this count. I started putting together a detailed timeline, every message, every meeting, every lie they'd spun. I wanted them to see I wasn't just some scorned husband. I was a man who'd done his homework. Late that night, I drafted a message and sent it to Sarah, one that I knew would push her buttons. I kept it simple but pointed. "I saw the photos. I know what you've been hiding. I don't want you to think you're getting away with this. We're done." I didn't specify where I'd seen her or how much I knew, but I made sure she understood I was fully aware of her treachery. Then I called Mike and left a voice message, calm but firm. "We need to talk. You've crossed a line and I want answers soon." I knew that would scare him more than anything. They both thought they'd gotten away with it, but I was closing in. I didn't want to hear excuses, just the truth. After I sent those messages, I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker. My stomach felt tight, like a rubber band stretched to its limit. Every part of me wanted to explode, but I kept my composure. This was about more than just anger. It was about sending a message. I was not going to be the guy who gets cheated on then forgets about it. Not anymore. I made a mental note. Tomorrow I'd be face to face with Sarah and Mike. They'd be caught off guard, cornered with nowhere left to run. I'd finally get the answers I needed, and then the real revenge would start. Because I knew one thing for certain: once I was done, they wouldn't just lose me. They'd lose everything they thought they had, including their reputations. And that's when I realized I wasn't just angry anymore. I was hungry. Hungry for justice, for closure, for making sure they'd regret every single lie, every moment of betrayal. I could almost taste the satisfaction already. I just had to wait for the right moment. The morning came faster than I expected, and I felt a strange mixture of dread and anticipation. I knew Sarah would be expecting me to blow up, to scream, maybe even to leave her right then and there. That's not what I wanted. I needed to be calculated, cold, controlled. I wanted her to see that I was serious, dead serious. I dressed carefully, choosing clothes that looked sharp but didn't scream desperation. I didn't want her to think I was a man on the edge. I wanted her to think I had it all figured out, because I did. I had the evidence, the plan, and the mental clarity to pull it off. I felt my stomach tighten again as I made my way to the hotel she was staying in. When I arrived, the lobby buzzed with morning chatter and the scent of fresh coffee. I kept my face neutral, like I was just another guest. I took the elevator to their floor, my pulse pounding in my ears. I had the key card in my pocket, the one I'd stolen from Mike's room. I kept it close, like a weapon, ready to use if I needed to. Finally, I knocked on their door. Sarah answered instantly, her face bright with that fake smile she always wore, but I saw the flicker of surprise, quick, fleeting. I stepped inside without waiting for her invite. Mike was there too, looking just as nervous. They both knew something had shifted. "I wanted to talk," I said, voice steady. "I have a few questions." I laid out the photos, the recordings, the timeline I'd prepared. Watching their faces drain of color was almost satisfying. Sarah's lips parted slightly, her eyes darting around like a trapped animal. Mike looked as if he'd seen a ghost. "You knew I was watching," I said coldly, voice low. "You thought you could hide this from me forever. I want to hear it from you. Why?" I pointed at the photos. "Why cheat during my wedding weekend, while I was promising myself to you? How long has this been going on?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't say anything right away. Mike looked down, trying to avoid my gaze. I pressed on. "You're both selfish. You think you're clever, sneaking off, hiding behind lies. Well, I've got enough evidence to make sure everyone knows what kind of people you really are." My voice cracked slightly, but I kept my composure. Answer me, was this just a fling or does it run deeper? I asked, trying to keep my voice from trembling. They looked at each other, silent. That's when Sarah finally spoke, voice trembling but trying to sound defiant. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. It's over now. I scoffed. A mistake, that's what you call betrayal. I think you've gotta. Lot more explaining to do. I've got proof that you two have been lying to everyone, including yourselves. I paused, then added, I want the truth now, no more excuses. She looked away, tears streaming down her face. Mike shifted uncomfortably. I could see the guilt in their eyes, the cracks in their facades. That's when I pulled out the last piece of my plan. I handed her the phone with the recordings I'd made. Here, watch this. Listen to what you two said, what you planned. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about what you've done to everything we had. Her hands trembled as she looked at the phone. I saw her swallow hard. Mike looked like he wanted to disappear. I knew I'd made my point. There was no denying their guilt now. I don't want to see or hear from either of you again, I said. You've destroyed what little trust I had left, but I won't be a fool anymore. I'm done. I'm walking out and I won't let you drag me down with your lies. You want to keep pretending, go ahead. I'm done pretending I didn't see this coming. Without waiting for a reply, I turned and walked out of the room. My chest felt tight, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. I had finally confronted them, laid everything bare. The damage was done, and now it was their turn to deal with the fallout. As I stepped into the hallway, I clenched my fists. I wasn't going to call her, text her, or try to explain. I was done with her excuses. I knew she'd try to reach out later, but I'd already made my decision. No more second chances. No more lies. This chapter was over and I was finally taking control. I left the hotel that day with the keys to my apartment in my pocket, a new resolve burning inside me. Whatever came next, I'd face it alone. I knew one thing for sure, I'd never let someone betray me like this again. And that, for now, was enough. The fallout hit me harder than I thought it would. I expected some relief, maybe even a sense of closure, but instead I felt hollow. It was like I'd been holding my breath for days, and now that I'd finally exhaled, I was left gasping. The house felt empty even though I was there. Every little thing in it reminded me of her, her laugh, her scent, her touch. Now all I had was the silence and the weight of the betrayal. I avoided my phone for a while, knowing she'd probably try to reach out. I wasn't ready to hear her voice, not yet. Instead, I spent hours walking through the city, trying to clear my head, trying to process what had happened. My stomach was still clenched, my mind kept replaying the moments, the looks, the lies, the betrayal. I was angry, furious even, but I was also exhausted. That night I received a message. It was from Sarah. I hesitated before opening it, knowing I shouldn't, but curiosity got the better of me. I unlocked my phone and read her words. I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. Please, can we talk? The anger flooded back instantly. I felt my fists tighten and I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. Sorry. Sorry doesn't undo what she did. Sorry doesn't erase the years of trust I had in her. Sorry doesn't fix the fact that she slept with my best friend during our wedding weekend. I didn't reply. I just stared at the screen, feeling that dark, bitter taste in my mouth. I knew I had to do something different. Sitting around waiting for her to come to her senses wasn't going to help. I needed to take control of this mess. I needed to show her that I wasn't just hurt, I was done. Done with the lies, the betrayal, the false promises. I had to make her see how much damage she'd done. The plan began to form again. I decided I'd record everything, her attempts to contact me, her crying, her begging. I wanted her to understand that I was serious about moving on, that I'd be unshakable now. After all, I'd been the one giving everything, and she threw it all away. I wanted her to feel what that felt like, to be on the receiving end of heartbreak she caused. Next, I thought about how to make her regret her choices in a way that would stay with her forever. I remembered that Mike had a reputation among some of our friends for being a bit of a player, flirty, manipulative, never serious. I knew he'd try to spin his side of the story, paint himself as the victim. That's why I wanted to expose him further. I researched ways to get access to his social media, to leave a trail that would hint at his own deception. But the real coup de grace was going to be personal. I started drafting a letter, cold, direct, and unflinching. It was for her, but it was also for everyone else she'd tried to still keep her secrets from. I wanted her to see that I was serious about ending this, that I'd take away her false sense of control. I also reached out to some friends I could trust, people who knew the truth, who'd seen her true colors. I told them everything, and surprisingly, they were supportive. They didn't judge me. They just wanted me to be safe and to get through this stronger. That gave me a tiny bit of comfort. By then, I'd decided I wasn't going to let her mess with my head anymore. I was going to cut all ties and move forward, no matter how hard it was. I started packing up some of my things, putting away pictures and keepsakes that reminded me of what I'd lost. I knew I'd have to burn some bridges to truly heal, but that's what revenge felt like, cutting out the poison, cleaning the wounds, and rebuilding from the ashes. I left the house that night with a plan to disappear for a while, just enough time for her to realize what she threw away. I knew she'd try to come back, to manipulate the situation, but I was prepared. I'd be waiting, not for her but for myself, to finally reclaim what was mine. This was about more than just revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity. I knew I'd never trust her again, but I also knew I'd come out of this stronger. All I had to do now was hold the line, because once I made my move, there was no going back. The day I finally took action felt like the culmination of everything I'd been through: months of betrayal, anger, planning, and finally release. I sat at my desk, my hands steady but my heart pounding like a drum. I had all the pieces lined up: the evidence, the carefully crafted letter, the keys I was about to hand over. It was time to close this chapter once and for all. First, I printed out everything: screenshots, recordings, the timeline I'd built. I double-checked that everything was clear, undeniable. I wanted her to see that I wasn't leaving anything to chance or hope. I wanted her to understand that I knew what she did, and I was done pretending I didn't. I knew this would cut deep, but she'd earned it. Next, I took the keys to my apartment, the one I'd kept waiting for me after I moved out of the house. I placed the letter inside, folded neatly, just so she couldn't miss the message. Then I slipped the envelope into a manila folder, sealed it, and carefully placed everything in a plain, unassuming box. I didn't want any drama or theatrics, just a straightforward act of finality. I headed to her place, a small apartment she'd been renting after the wedding. I'd made sure she was out so I wouldn't have to face her in person. I left the box on her doorstep along with a note: "You lied, you betrayed, and you nearly destroyed everything. I hope you realize what you lost." No signature, no anger, just truth. I knew she'd find it, read it, and understand that I was done. Walking away from her door, I felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. It was over, finally. The weight of the betrayal, the anger, the humiliation, they all pressed down on me at first. But once I got home, I felt lighter, like I'd shed a burden I'd carried for far too long. I could breathe again. In the days that followed, I focused on myself. I cut out the toxic people, reconnected with old friends, and started building a new routine. It wasn't easy, and I still had moments where the pain resurfaced, but I refused to let it consume me. I realized that revenge, while satisfying in the moment, wasn't enough to heal the damage. It was about reclaiming my life piece by piece. Looking back, I'm glad I didn't lash out in anger, even though it was tempting. Instead, I chose a quiet, unassailable finality. I wanted her to see that I could walk away with my head held high, without stooping to her level. The truth is, I am better than the betrayal she handed me. I am stronger than the shame and heartbreak. Now I tell this story to anyone who's sick of feeling helpless in the face of betrayal. It's not about revenge for revenge's sake. It's about reclaiming your dignity, taking back your power, and knowing that you deserve better. Because in the end, all the lies and betrayals don't define you; what you do after them does. And I chose to walk away, not broken but reborn. That's the lesson I want everyone to remember. Sometimes the best revenge is simply walking away with your integrity intact. Nothing more, nothing less.